How's it going, everyone? So, before we dive into the episode, I really want to say thank you to everyone that is listening in, that's tuning in, that's enjoying this content and getting value from it. I really love that. That's why I do it. But there's a huge amount of you that are listening that are not subscribed, not following the podcast. And I really want to encourage you to please follow and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening or viewing this on. It really helps out the podcast. It helps out the algorithm. It helps more people hear this content that you already find helpful and that they hopefully will as well. So if you go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast on any platform that you're listening on, and please share it with your friends, that'll be great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's get into the episode. How's it going, Ann? It's great to get you on the podcast. I think that we've been trying to get this thing done for a couple months now, but I'm really excited for our conversation.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here. Happy to finally connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ann, why don't you tell me about how your journey started, right? What made you go down the path that you did? Because you have a bit more of a unique background compared to, the other degenerate hackers that I have on the podcast, right?
Yeah, I know. Thanks for letting, someone from the dark side of marketing come into your podcast. I appreciate it. But I did start with an engineering degree. So I actually went from the, deep tech over to a little more soft skills, but still have stayed in technology and cybersecurity, and have really loved this industry and space. So happy to be on the show.
So you got your degree in engineering. What specifically, what part of engineering?
I did mechanical engineering. Actually, I really loved math, and looked at different careers that would allow me to do things with math and numbers and analytics, and went into that area. My father was an engineer. He really encouraged me, which I appreciate to this day. And I started out interning at Boeing in true kind of mechanical engineering. And then, just sort of evolved into more product management, and then now kind of all aspects of marketing, which I enjoy, and still getting to work with a lot of the technology, getting to dive as deep as I want to go, but still be able to enjoy some of the creative aspects that marketing brings.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in college, I was getting my degree in criminal justice, and I worked with a guy that was getting his degree in mechanical engineering. And he was he studied more than anyone else I knew. And I mean, he ended up getting his degree, but he didn't go into mechanical engineering or anything like that. He actually just went into IT. And
Really?
I graduated like a year or two ahead of him. And I told him, I was like, hey, I know you're trying to be a mechanical engineer, right? I don't know what the career path looks like for that, but you already have experience in IT. Just look at that first and then try and make your pivot, because he had student loans like I did, right? So he has to have an income, coming in to pay off those loans. But it's really fascinating, right? Because I always think if I were to go back and like get my bachelor's and do it all over, I
Mm-hmm.
would probably get my degree in like math or engineering or something like that. Like that is right in my wheelhouse. I took calculus for fun because I considered it to be an easy class, and math, that is an easy class to people that are not in math. You know, that's considered to be like a difficult class, right? I literally took it for fun, and I wanted to go further with it, but it was like, okay, you're gonna do criminal justice, you're gonna do math, and I was like, I don't know about that math thing.
Yeah, I really loved it. There's something great about like getting to that solution at the end of a problem, and so I still really enjoy math, although I don't get to do it nearly as much anymore. Now it's just maybe calculating revenues and things like that. Not as much detailed calculus as I was doing at one point. But engineering is a great degree that you can use to bounce off into so many different fields of study. And that's how I feel about like cybersecurity in general. We're seeing more and more people come into this field and this realm and in this area. They come from all different backgrounds, right? Sometimes it's communications coming into cybersecurity. Sometimes it's testers, IT, all different areas that are now joining kind of the whole swath of cybersecurity professionals that are needed to kind of fill some of the resource gaps that are happening in this industry today.
Yeah, it's interesting, as I mean, now I'm a cloud security engineer, right? And so I have to be able to think of problems forward, backward, start at the middle, go to the end, start at the middle, go to the front, like I have to really be able to just dissect different problems. And especially like when it's a legit attack, on the infrastructure, like I have to be able to, reverse engineer that thing quickly, right? But I bring it up, right? Because it kind of plays into that math mentality. When you get into math, when you actually, start understanding it, you kind of see the numbers differently. Like you literally start thinking of, you'll see a solution and then you start thinking of, okay, well, how did they get there? Well, this is probably where they started. And, like it's a game almost, right? And I think that's what kind of piqued my interest with cybersecurity, right? Is that ability to be so fluid with your thinking. Because, I guess it's interesting. I don't consider myself to be a very creative person. I consider myself to be like very average, not creative at all. I can't draw to save my life. I can't play an instrument to save my life. My wife, on the other hand, she can play like 6 or 7 instruments, like hands down, like she's a symphony orchestra violinist. Like I'm sitting over here, the least talented person in my family, and somehow I made it, right? So it's interesting also, you bring up the different backgrounds that everyone is coming into cybersecurity with. And a few months ago, maybe even a year ago at this point, I think it might have been a year, I had on someone that was a former opera singer, and now she's an application security engineer. And I'm sitting here like, what, like, how in the world do you make that jump?
I think you're going to see more and more of that, though. I mean, because there is this huge gap, right? There's, I think, 4 million or something. The World Economic Forum said open jobs and a deficit in cybersecurity workers. And so there's a huge opportunity here when the job market as a whole may not be as exciting in tech as we'd like it to be. And so, you're going to see people, I think, explore it and see if there are ways for opera singers or marketers or other people to play a part. Because it is one of the maybe unique roles in tech where you really feel like you can make an impact and that you're giving back in a way. There's a real purpose to it in the sense that you're fighting the bad guys, right? And you're, not only helping companies be more secure and resilient, but potentially even the whole country, be more secure and resilient. So I think that appeals to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds to be able to work in a field that really has a purpose and allows them to make a real impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like because when I was trying to get into cybersecurity back in like 2014, 2015, and I was doing everything under the sun that I possibly could be to get into the field.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because it was a field that was in high demand or, anything like that really. In all honesty, I was underpaid, so I wanted to make more money, right? I wanted to like make enough money to have a family and whatnot. But it also like piqued my interest. It seemed like there was just, never ending amount of things that I could learn, that I could dive into, that I could specialize in. And now, that still holds true, right? And so that like kind of scratches that itch for me in a different way, if that makes sense. But I think COVID kind of, I don't want to say exacerbated the situation, but it really put cybersecurity at the forefront, right? Because I'll tell you, I have a friend. He's a manager in a Ford manufacturing plant, right? And I went to high school with him, and we've stayed in touch ever since and whatnot. And when COVID hit, he was out of work for like 6 months. Like 6 months, he was basically out of work. And for the next maybe 2 years after that, there would be months where he just didn't work because they'd shut down the plant for whatever reason. And I'm over here just living my life like nothing ever changed because it literally never changed. The only thing that changed for me was my manager calling me one day and saying, "Yeah, you're just going to be remote now. It's fine." And I've been remote for the past, 4 years, 5 years at this point. And like, there's nothing changed, right? I've changed jobs several times and whatnot. And he looks at that and he's like, man, I want the stability. I want the freedom to be able to, kind of work from wherever I want to work. It doesn't make sense for me to have to be in one singular place, to do a job. And he wants to be able to have a family, have a career that is paying the bills, having some money left over for the family and whatnot. And I think that was put to the forefront of everyone's mind where there was like, I feel like it happened for a week, but during that week, people were like, well, what jobs are still working right now? What jobs were not even impacted? And I mean, the job that was the least impacted that worked the entire time was cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's
I
really eye
totally,
opening.
yeah. I mean, not only is, I mean, obviously cybersecurity is a, fairly lucrative field, but yeah, it's not going away anytime soon. In fact, the problem's only getting bigger. I mean, my company, Adaptiva, we're in the patch management space where we're patching vulnerabilities that are discovered on endpoints. And last year, there were like 26,000 plus vulnerabilities discovered. It's going up this year. And the mean time to exploit them just keeps getting faster and faster. I think it was like 7 days on average. And for some of the high risk ones, it was like less than a day. So when you are facing those kind of numbers and with some of the new technology that's coming out, like AI, that only makes it faster and easier to
Yeah.
both secure your network, but also potentially, if the bad guys use it, exploit it, then this career path is one that is only going to become more and more in demand, and potentially, just more and more areas to be able to focus on and have to look at and secure. And so, yeah, I obviously I think it's a great area to be involved in, but one that I hope we can recruit more people into and bring more people into, because there's so much work to be done.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up an interesting problem because I feel like still there's a lot of companies out there that don't know the type of position or the type of person that they're looking for to really come in and make a meaningful difference, right? I'll give you an example. Previously when I was interviewing for a job, which if you're my employer right now and you're listening, I haven't done it in a while, right? But people people would be like extremely extremely technical, right? And that's fine. I can deep dive into things, but typically when I get into those interviews, the recruiter is prepping me ahead of time, and they're saying like, hey, they're going to do a deep dive into IAM or Kim or whatever it might be, right? Because it's a courtesy. It gives me the opportunity to brush up on that knowledge, because I'm not going to know everything at all times. I may have learned it for 3 months and I haven't touched it in 4 years. I mean, that's a very real thing. It's not that I don't know it. It's that I haven't looked at it, like there's a very big difference between the two. And, this role really needed someone that was more of a people person, someone that would actually meet with the teams, get to know them, kind of sway them to patch, one of those 26,000 vulnerabilities, right? And make a difference in the environment. And, this company kept on going extremely technical. And I'm saying here, like, guys, you don't need that. What you need is you need someone that can talk to people, that of which, I have a proven track record of over 200 episodes where I could talk to, anyone and make an impact, right? Make a difference to some extent. But they didn't see it like that, but they're hiring for a role now that isn't going to be a fit for the job functions that they have. And that's a problem that is very prevalent, I think. And then, I think another part of it, right, is, companies, one, they don't know really the skill sets necessary for the role, but two, we're also under hiring. If you go on LinkedIn jobs right now, right, like I feel like LinkedIn jobs is a good barometer for where the job market is. Every single security role out there has over 100 applicants, every single one. And if you find one under 100, like it's a rarity. You're on page 12, you're probably pretty desperate at that point, which is crazy to me, because it tells me something really weird is going on in the market where I think everyone's a little bit nervous. We have a major election coming up here in a couple days. People are nervous about where the economy is going to go, like what the outlook of it is. And I think a lot of companies are also worried. And so we're in an interesting like limbo that we haven't been in quite a long time. At least not that I remember. I entered the workforce in like 2009 technically, right? And that was at like the tail end of the recession. So I didn't even really understand the recession, of like what was going on when it was happening.
Yeah, and I mean, I really agree with you. Your ability, to communicate is key, I think, in the cybersecurity role, and you're not alone in that. Sometimes those technical certifications and things will open the door for you and get you the interviews. But in hiring today, there really has to be that balance because I had a boss, shout out to Lisa Stewart, that used to say she hired for aptitude or attitude as much as aptitude. And I think that's really going to become key with cybersecurity roles in particular going forward because, not only do you have to have those deep technical skills to be able to do, the forensic analysis or whatever the job is requiring from just security perspective, but you have to be able to communicate that. You have to be able to present it to the team. You have to be able to convince people to, take certain courses of action. And you also have to maybe have just sort of that creativity to try different solutions to problems. So, and hopefully high integrity as well in this role is key too. So there's a lot of soft skills there that just have to blend with the technical skills as well in order to really make a good candidate and a good employee. Um,
Yeah.
but it is still very competitive. I agree. It's kind of hard to get your foot in the door sometimes on these
Yeah.
positions for sure. And a lot of people are recognizing there's a lot of growth potential, stability potential in this space and are struggling to kind of find their way in and navigate how they at least get that first door open for them in cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a good point. You brought up the soft skills, right? Or we've been talking about it for a bit now, right? But you brought up the soft skills, and having that foundation of soft skills really benefits, you like tenfold in cybersecurity. And I'll give you a good example. I started my career in help desk, right? And when you're on help desk, and I worked for an enhanced 911 company, right? So when our solution is going down, people typically just lose their mind because they may or may not be able to dial 911. And yes, it is absolutely an emergency, but you don't have to yell at me right from hello, right? So, but I learned a lot of social skills in that job, right? And for probably a year and a half, I would have like massive anxiety in this job to the point where I'd have to like go for walks, several times a day for 30 minutes just to like decompress and process what I just went through. And, that maybe I guess that maybe sounds potentially like weak or stupid or something like that. Right. But, going from being in education, right, just being in college to a job that is high stress, like help desk overall can be high stress regardless. But now you're thrown into a company that supports a critical application for a business and you don't even know what a critical application is, because you're that new in the field.
Yeah.
It was a trying time, but in that situation, I learned how to de-escalate very quickly. I learned how to, find out critical information within 30 seconds. Within 30 seconds, you know what's going on generally, and you can start making progress and whatnot. I learned how to get the right people on the call right from the very beginning, how to assess the situation quickly and move forward with it in the right direction. And all of those skills really do pay off when you get into security because I always tell people start with help desk, right? Like you want the ability to tell someone no, have them yell at you in return, and you stick to your no, right? And a great example of this, right? I'm 10 years into security. Literally last week, I had a phone call with 150 developers on the call. And then I was the only security person on the call, the only one. And they were trying to convince me, at first they were very nice. They were trying to convince me to put in a certain rule into my AWS WAF that I was rolling out globally. And they couldn't really explain it like properly, right? Because I need to know what the rule is, why it's getting blocked, why do we need to add this exception? Does it bypass the entire WAF? All of these, minutia, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The things that you need to know for the technical aspect of the job. Well, at one point in time, they couldn't give me any straight answers. And so I just kept on asking questions. For 30 minutes, I asked questions. I didn't give any answers. I didn't give any context. I only asked questions because they were trying to beat around the bush. And I could tell they were trying to bully me into, just going with them, right? Because they wanted to get off this call. And so they figure, okay, 150 developers are going to overwhelm Joe. And, he's going to give us what we want, right? Because it probably would have worked at the other, 10 security guys that they had there, but not with me because I got all day. You just made this a priority, right? So now I get to call other things off. And at the end of the questions, literally 30 minutes of me questioning it, I said, you guys are just trying to bully me into bypassing the WAF because you don't want to deploy it. You don't want to work within it. And I had to explain to them, I said, hey, look, this was an audit finding, right? They
Yeah.
gave us a timeline for when we needed to fix this. This is why it's going in. And they tried to rebuttal it, tried to refute it, many different ways and whatnot. And I said, there is no refuting this. You are doing this, or it's going to be reported to your VP and your director, and I will reference this conversation. And I told them, I was like, it's being recorded. I have the minute keeper right now, and I'll tell them go to minute 33 in this conversation where I started to really go into them.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, they very begrudgingly went along with it. But, I had to learn how to stand my ground from 10 years prior, right? I had to learn how to literally look at someone that is yelling at me in the face, in person like you, and, tell them no. That's not happening, and it's a unique skill set that not many security professionals have. Like I said, the other 10 security people that they would have had on that call, they would have just caved in 10, 15 minutes, and
It's
they
funny.
wouldn't have known that they were making the environment less secure,
Yeah. Our CEO here and founder, Deepak Kumar, he actually has a medical degree. So he was a doctor and now he does software. So he's made a big career transition. But he has often talked about just, the need, especially when you're in the medical profession and dealing with emergencies, to sort of stay emotionally calm and how having a control over your emotions is so key in just day-to-day business, recruiting, in marketing, and also in even our technical roles. He really encourages us to look for people who either have a customer service background at some point in their career or a help desk background, like what you're describing, where they've had to deal with challenging personalities and figure out how to just maintain those relationships and be professional and not get overly emotional or overly reactive in those situations. He feels that that basic skill set is something that is just so hugely important in day-to-day business at all different levels of the company. And so, yeah, as we recruit, that's something he always encourages us to look for. And I think it applies to the cybersecurity profession as well as, just like I said, even for marketing, I tend to try to look for that too. It's just a great skill to have, especially when you're on a call with 150 people who might be telling you something different. Figuring out just how you find common ground and work forward is really key.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been in situations where I'll go into a company and there's a terrible relationship between, my team and another team. And of course, a system down incident occurs and I need that other team. We're relying on them and they really don't like to work with us. I have not shied away from bribery with food and drinks and whatever it takes, to
I
get the
know,
help
I
that
hear
I
you.
need.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's
Sometimes
funny.
it's required.
It really is, and I will say the cybersecurity in general, I mean, we do have a lot of incidents, we do have a lot of emergencies that happen, and being able to handle those crisis communications in a way that's, done professionally, delicately, understands everything and all the implications that come at it can be challenging. So you have those big emergencies that happen that you really need strong leaders who don't get overly, overly emotional in some of those situations. But then also just day to day. I mean, you mentioned starting in IT or starting in help desk as a way to potentially pivot and swerve into a cybersecurity career. And one of the things I hear about most often, even from our customers and prospects, is that kind of fight between IT and security today, or at least gap. We'll call it gap, where security is finding all these vulnerabilities and issues and then pointing to IT to go fix them, and then saying, "Oh, IT, you're not moving fast enough, and you're exposing me to too much risk." And so there is sort of this constant kind of like back and forth that's going on between IT and security today. And having the skill set to, approach that from a collaborative, how can we work together to reduce risk for our organization perspective is important. But, where we're coming from too is we also want technology to help bridge that gap too for between IT and security teams, where the reports and the findings and the vulnerability assessments, all that data is there and being found by technology. But then IT can also show their progress against it and how they're taking action on that data and the rationale they have behind what they're prioritizing and what they can connect all that in technology and use technology as a way to bridge the the security teams and the IT teams that can help augment some of the and hopefully resolve some of the communication issues that come about because of just the dynamic between IT and security teams.
Yeah, something that I've recently run into that's been a prevalent problem for many years now, right, is with the advent of the cloud, your on-prem legacy solutions don't quite work like they should in the cloud, right? And so now you end up having, 6, 7 solutions doing vulnerability management, looking at different things, different ways. And how in the world can your developers or your engineers or just IT overall keep up with that? Right? Because I'm the security professional that's supposed to own all 7 of those tools, and I don't look at all of them. Right? Like I need a solution that correlates all of it, brings it all in, and tells me what I need to pay attention to, right? And I think that's like kind of where most of the industry is missing the mark, right? It's like they provide a solution of we do pipeline security vulnerability management, right? Or we do infrastructure in the cloud vulnerability management and all this stuff. It's like, I don't care. You said vulnerability management at the end of all of that. I need it all in one singular tool.
Yeah. And it's been interesting. I mean, vulnerability management is one area, right? But security in general, I mean, how many different tools and technologies and vendors are there in that space now? It's unbelievable. And that's why we're starting to see, especially some of the big leaders like CrowdStrike and Microsoft and others, start talking about consolidation and how can we help you consolidate the number of vendors you're using, the number of technologies you're using, so that, I mean, because there's a risk to that. I mean, just manage a whole bunch of different vendors is hard on resources, but also like making sure they're all secure and keeping up to date and is key. And so we are seeing a move towards trying to consolidate and have fewer vendors and fewer different products in the space. And so I think the technologies that are going to be, cross-platform, like for us, like helping you patch Windows and Mac and Linux on all your devices, as opposed to needing a different solution for each. Those are the ones that you're going to start seeing win across the board. And then also, in addition to just sort of consolidating the different vendors, I think in general, just the more that we can bring together visibility into what's happening across your systems, the better. Like security's always had sort of the security operations center, concept, the SOC, where you can go in and get all your alerts and keep an eye, but I feel like IT is missing that. IT doesn't have that single view into all my deployments that are happening, all my patches that are happening, all the things in real time. And I actually believe, certainly that's where we're heading from a product vision perspective, is starting to give companies more unified insight into both their security and their IT operations, bringing them together into one kind of single pane of glass so that you can stay on top of all the changes in data that are happening across endpoints and across the network.
So talk to me about how Adaptiva does that, right? How you guys bridge the gap between all these different kind of sprawling domains of vulnerability management and bring it all together into a consolidated way.
Yeah. So where we built a platform, we call it our one-site platform. And on top of that, we built a suite of products. And the one that most, we're talking about most these days is our patch management one-site patch solution, which integrates with all your different vulnerability management solutions out there in the marketplace today. So for example, next week I'm going to CrowdStrike's Falcon event in Europe. And there we'll be showcasing how you can use Falcon to analyze and assess all the vulnerabilities on your network. They have something called their expert AI rating that then prioritizes them as critical, high, medium, low. We take all that data in, we take their criticality factors in, and we allow you to set up patching strategies based on that data. So if it's a critical one, maybe I want you to go patch it right away with very limited approvals. But if it's a lower medium one, maybe I want to roll that out more slowly, a series of deployment waves. So you set up those rules in our system, but we're pulling in all the vulnerability management information from the vulnerability management providers. And then we're kind of consolidating reporting that, right? So immediately the security teams can quickly see the reports, see the insights in real time. Okay, how are my vulnerabilities getting patched? Which devices still need to be patched? Which ones were successful? What versions are they on? All that rich insight and data in real time. So today, in many companies, those vulnerability assessments, they print them out on like huge Excel spreadsheets and hand them over to IT and say, go patch this. And they meet every week and kind of fight back and forth on why more things weren't patched. We're hoping, again, that by just pulling all that data in, taking automated action on the data, you can solve that or resolve those kind of back and forth fights on vulnerabilities and provide a single unified view into the compliance of your organization.
And so it sounds like, my developers or my engineers, they would be able to log in and like see the assets that they're responsible for, or get like some sort of automated alerts like, hey, this new high finding or whatever, right, is on your assets over here. Here's the card, go work on it. That sort of thing. Is there
For us,
a flag?
we're taking a slightly different approach. I mean, traditional patch management forces kind of the IT teams to have to go in, and every time a patch comes out, they have to take it down, take the metadata, configure it, test it, roll it out to a test system, make sure it's working. With us, we have a team that's constantly putting those patches into our catalog. And really, our customers just set up the rules. They say anytime for, this group of machines or for this type of patch, do these things. And so we let you really set up the strategies and then we automate it. So we believe in really speeding and accelerating the patching through automation. So you're not having to manually patch and set up deployments for each patch. You're setting your rules for patching as an organization, and we're taking care of the rest. But we're putting controls in place too, because we know automation can be scary. Bad things can happen sometimes when you roll out patches. And we give a lot of control over that process. So you can pause patching, you can cancel patches, you can roll back patches to previous versions. Our belief is you need to move faster. The bad guys are not slowing down. You need to find ways to accelerate and free up your IT teams and limited resources. And so by allowing them to set up their rules and then we automate, but giving them controls and guardrails that if something does go wrong, they can pause and take a minute. That's our belief on how patching should really happen in the future.
And does it work for like pipeline security or pipeline vulnerabilities?
We're
What
focused
is it?
on endpoint. So our
Okay.
patching is around endpoints, but we're beta testing right now the full cross-platform, so Mac, Linux, and Windows updates, and then also third-party applications. We support patching of over 9,000 third-party applications and BIOS drivers, servers, all sorts of patching. Truly like unified endpoint patching.
Hmm. That's interesting. It seemed like when I got into security, the industry was at a scheduled, patching process, right? Where you're like what you said, this group of devices gets patched, every Monday night at like midnight or whatever it might be, right? And then I think as people got more into the cloud and their environments grew rapidly, they started moving away from that. And it's interesting because I actually never noticed moving away from it, but I moved away from it, and it's a fascinating way to kind of bring it back, especially if you're centralizing all of it, right? Like you're making it more easily consumable, for everything to be in one place, and then schedule it out from there. That really kind of like frees up at least my developers, right? Frees
Yeah,
up my developers to be able to do developing work rather than security work necessarily.
it's the only way you can really start. I mean, with the rate of vulnerabilities that we were talking about earlier, and just how many are coming at you and how quickly they're being exploited, the only way that you can get the scale necessary is to automate more. And right now, we did a state of patch management report with the Ponemon Institute, and we found that 59% said it was taking them 2 weeks or more to begin a deployment after a patch was released. So that's just like way too long when on average vulnerabilities are being exploited every 7 days. And in many cases, I think Gartner found it was taking like companies a month or more to fully roll out a patch. And so that's just you're just constantly going to be behind and it's never going to scale. And so we're very bullish on automation. That's going to help you scale, but automation with control.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a mindset shift a little bit for companies, but with how limited we are in resources right now and people to just tackle this problem, technology is going to have to fill the gap.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, I think we're at like the top of our time here. I know you have a flight to catch and whatnot, but
Yeah,
I really enjoyed our conversation. I definitely would want to have you back on sometime.
yeah, it was great, Joe. I loved it. Thanks for letting a marketer stray over here. I appreciate it, and would love to talk again in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they could connect with you if they wanted to connect with you, and where they could find the company if they wanted to learn more.
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's a great place to find me and Baker at LinkedIn, and then also Adaptiva is the name of the company, Adaptiva. Encourage everyone to go check that out. I blog on there, and we have a lot of great resources just for training. And also, I know we talked a lot about entering the cybersecurity field. I will just put a shout out to I'm very active in Women in the Cloud, and Women in the Cloud right now is working with Microsoft, who's sponsoring over 5,000 scholarships for people who want to take the Microsoft Fundamentals course in security. And that's a great one for women and allies as well. It's gender neutral to go and apply for those scholarships. If you want to break into cybersecurity, I highly recommend going and taking a look at that. And that's a great way to start getting some of those early certifications with Microsoft in order to start showcasing and learning more about cybersecurity. So definitely check that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode.